record. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon for a special session of the Ohio Workforce Coalition's monthly webinar series. This is a special meet and greet session with our colleagues, newer colleagues to the Community Development Department at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. The Ohio Workforce Coalition has been around since 2007 and pulls together business and industry, economic development, workforce professionals, human service, community-based organizations, labor, really the run of the continuum of stakeholders interested in workforce development, all to think about and talk about the needs of businesses, workers, and Ohio's workforce system. We are excited to have our guest here today. And again, if you are just joining us, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, and we will get right to it. So I have asked, and I'm glad to have Kyle Fee help me kind of the MC and lead the discussion today. Many of you have known Kyle. I felt a little silly inviting people to meet new staff of the community development team because I think Kyle's done at least 2 or 3 webinars for the coalition, and I don't think he counts as new anymore, but has been really important to thinking in the workforce space, has worked on a number of reports that I think you all will find interesting, and hopefully someone shares one of them today. But of course, he's able to make a lot of the connections between the various resources that exist at the bank. I have been glad to have Kyle's support as a member of the coalition's leadership committee until he switched into more of a very data focused role. So I'm glad to still have him willing to engage with us and here to help introduce his colleagues. So with that, Kyle, I'm gonna kick it over to you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And I really just want to recognize the Ohio Workforce Coalition for all their work that you guys do for the state of Ohio. It's something that I think is very important and doesn't get enough gratitude for all the work that everyone does. So again, thanks for that. I would also say thanks for the opportunity to just kind of meet and greet with folks, so to speak. It's not something that, in this kind of COVID world that we're living in, and us not being in the office, it can be challenging to kind of get new staff out there to meet folks and kind of have the important meetings that we needed to have. So really appreciate this venue to do that for folks. Part of my MC role, I figured I had to get dressed up for it, so I'm in the festive mood this afternoon and looking forward to a really good conversation. Normally when folks hear about the Federal Reserve Bank, they really don't know what the Federal Reserve does or a whole lot about it. So I figured I'd start with a couple high-level remarks about the system and kind of how we work across the system with our other colleagues at the other 12 Federal Regional Reserve Banks. The Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland is, we call it the 4th District. It's made up of all of Ohio, the western third of Pennsylvania, the eastern half of Kentucky, and then a little bit of the panhandle of West Virginia. So pretty diverse geography when it comes down to the type of issues that we kind of encounter in our geography. But I would just also mention that the Federal Reserve System kind of has this thing that's called a dual mandate. That's kind of our guiding policy targets that we generally focus on. And the first one of that dual mandate is inflation, so keeping prices stable at roughly 2%. And the other one is maximum employment. And this is kind of where community development and our interest in workforce development specifically kind of intersects and aligns a little bit nicely. Excuse me. The community development function at the Federal Reserve Bank was originally created to address redlining issues, so primarily focused on lending and making sure that credit flows equally to all communities and all populations. However, over the years, the kind of function at the Federal Reserve System kind of evolved and changed as the topics have changed. So again, originally focused on kind of lending and access to mortgage credits, mortgage credit. So we naturally went into other housing related issues related to foreclosure, delinquencies, vacant and abandoned properties, et cetera. And then there's small business has kind of been a key part of the work within community development over the years as well. And then, I think it's kind of naturally emerged that our interest in workforce and workforce development is something that we focus on at the community development. And as I mentioned before, that's largely due to the connection with and promoting kind of the idea of maximum employment. So we are interested in learning more about the labor market as it relates to low-wage work. So that's, again, kind of a natural intersection for us in the community development department to kind of get out and do our work. The way we work with in the community development part of Cleveland. We kind of have this outreach research model that we like to kind of describe and use. It's been a little bit challenging in this remote environment, but nonetheless, it's still proven to be pretty effective. And the idea behind this outreach research model is that the research informs the outreach, and the outreach informs the research. So with my time with the Ohio Workforce Coalition, I was always inundated with different kind of research questions and data ideas from folks in the field. So that's again, I really value that kind of interaction with the Ohio Workforce Coalition, and I look forward to kind of it continuing as we're doing more of these things together now. Excuse me. Let's see. We also work in kind of a systems approach too, I should say, working with our system colleagues across the Federal Reserve. So we often leverage, beg, borrow, and steal other issues and ideas. So we often find, our colleagues in Atlanta, for example, maybe doing something really innovative and interesting, and we'll kind of learn about it through our internal working groups, and then we can kind of hopefully bring it back to our district and share it with you folks. So there might be a few things currently going around that are good examples of that, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of those later today. Let's see, what else do we want to comment here? So again, the way we go about doing our work is applied research is kind of one of the outputs that we like to have, that we're capable of having. It's mostly, again, getting ideas from the community and going back to our shop, and then kind of crunching some numbers and being able to kind of go back out and share those results and findings with the community is really kind of the ideal way that we work. But sometimes it's not always the case, which is why we always do convenings is another thing that we're very good at, I should say. And a good example of that is our policy summit that we just had this summer. It was a first time for a virtual policy summit for us, but nonetheless, I think it was a success and brought a lot of folks together. And then lastly, I think the way we work is we kind of raise awareness on particular issues. So I think it's one of those things where if the Cleveland Fed's kind of interested in looking at it, it hopefully raises some eyebrows and allows other folks to kind of think about, maybe I should be concerned with a particular issue or not. So that's enough of me talking. I just want to again thank Rebecca and the Ohio Workforce Coalition for allowing us this chance to participate. And I am going to turn it over to my colleagues, Andrew Bennett. Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself, please. Oh, I think you might be on mute, Andrew.
Muted, yep.
Never fails, always happens one meeting.
So I think we need to skip Andrew and get set up. Is that right, Andrew?
So
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh, now we can.
Oh, okay.
Great.
So it was showing no mute, but well, hi everybody. Andrew Bennett here. I joined the community development team back in June. So it's been an absolute blast and whirlwind over the last 6 months. My title is community development specialist, but you can sort of think of it as sort of like a chief of staff type of role. So I'm plugged into a lot of internal communications, a lot of department strategy work, getting involved in a variety of different projects across the bank and system. So pleasure to meet all of you and looking forward to just kind of listening in and learning from all of you.
Eli, let's jump to you. Eli Stacy.
My name is Eli Stacy. Hi, everyone. I am a regional outreach manager for the Northern and Central Ohio region. But of course, our work crosses over the whole district, which includes, of course, all of Ohio, the eastern half of Kentucky, all the way to Pittsburgh, and then the Panhandle, West Virginia. So I really work with my other counterparts that are Bonnie Blankenship. She's down in Cincinnati, and Drew Pack, who's also in Pittsburgh. I get to work with them regarding our 3 areas, which are housing, access to affordable and quality housing, access to good paying jobs through economic and workforce development, and then the access to creating capital for small businesses working overall with partners in those areas. In particular, I really am focused in the district over economic and workforce development. So I get to work with some awesome tools and other things that I will definitely be sharing. Kyle, do you want me to share that now or we share it later? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the tools that I get to work with that I'm really excited about is the benefits cliff tool that came out of the Atlanta Fed. As Kyle alluded to, some of the work that we've done when it comes to just partnering and collaborating, trying to make sure we're sharing those great ideas across spaces so that our partners can benefit. So with the benefits cliff tool, there are multiple things that are being used in the state of Ohio, at least, for that in particular. And then there's another tool that's similar that also connects to as well that I'll mention in a moment. But when it comes to the benefits cliff tool out of the Atlanta Fed, there's one pilot that's going to be going on next year that will be with 6 counties with ODJFS. And then there's another, there's also some groups that are coming together, really led by Community Solutions, to really think about the policy implications of the benefits cliff. And then there's also some work that's being done already with Rural List, and it's being done with Atlanta Fed and Rural List as well. And the benefits cliff, that information will be shared. No, it's already been shared. Thank you, Kyle. And if you guys have any questions about that, I'm here. I'm also learning a little bit of background about me. I just got into this role back in September the 13th. So I've been in this role for just past 90 days. So I'm learning and growing, and I'm excited about partnering with you guys. I can go ahead and transfer it back to Kyle. Thank you.
Up next, Marissa Piazza.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Marissa Piazza. I'm a senior community development analyst in the community development department. I'm recently, like most of the staff, new to the team. I joined in August. I know many faces and names to the coalition here from my previous work at Cleveland State. So if you're like, Marissa, sounds familiar, I had worked at Cleveland State for over a decade in the economic development and workforce space. So I'm happy to be here. One of the things that I did want to share with everybody is I know Eli was excited to talk about the benefits cliff tool. Two of the main things I wanted to share with you is one, we have a newsletter. So if you're not on our newsletter list, I'm going to drop 2 links in the chat. One is to feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. That will keep you up to date with all the exciting workings that we've been working on. It also will let you connect with all of the research staff and outreach staff. I'm on the research team, so if you have any data questions, my contact information is out there. Feel free to reach out. And then the other thing is I'm going to share a link to a resource that is system-wide. And when we say system-wide, we mean all the different banks, right? So we act kind of independently, but are all shared. So this would be the San Francisco Bank and the Cleveland Bank and the Atlanta Bank. And there's a new platform and communication that's called Fed Communities. And what this really tries to do is bring together a variety of resources and information and kind of bring the human aspect of research. And Fed Communities is great because they have an event calendar and it allows you to plug into knowledge and expertise across the system. So you may be interested in all of the Federal Reserve banks, and you can subscribe to all their community development newsletters. But if you're interested in like this particular certain content, I would encourage you to go to Fed Communities. I find even before joining the Fed, I found all of their webinars extremely informative and extremely useful. So hopefully I will drop those in the chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow up. Back to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Marissa. And last but not least, Meredith Whitehead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Meredith Whitehead. I'm the program manager for strategic initiatives across the 4th District. I, like everyone else, am pretty new to the Fed on our team. I started in August. I'm in charge of our Resilient Workforce Initiative. So I have the pleasure of building that out and working collaboratively with Rebecca. Our purpose is to support workers' abilities to prepare and adapt and thrive in changing economic environments. I just wanted to share 3 kind of perspectives that are unique specifically to our district. One is our district states have lower than average employment and labor force participation rates. Our district states have higher poverty rates and lower rates of educational attainment than the national average. And our employment and economic growth in our district states have trailed in the national average during the recovery. So this is a very unique district and we have our work cut out for us, but I'm excited to do this work. It's also great working with Rebecca and just excited to see what we come up with. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you, Meredith. And so Rebecca asked us to kind of share some tools and other things that we come across in our day, or at least they're kind of Fed tools and things that we found were interesting. So that's kind of why we're going to be populating things in the chat. One that I wanted to kind of highlight as well, and I think it's a very powerful piece. And I say powerful because it's a video. It's a video that the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland commissioned local artists to make around economic inclusion and racial equity. And I bring that up again because it's something that we take very serious in our work, and it's a theme that runs through a lot of our work. So this kind of video helps to kind of convey that message and explain that. So I'm going to throw that in the chat. Feel free to watch it at your leisure, and obviously share it with other folks if you find it interesting. But again, it's really just meant to make the case from an economic perspective why economic inclusion and racial equity are important factors in all of our work. So there's that. Rebecca, where do you want us to go now? What do you think?
Well, I think that it would be great to open it up to questions. I know there's there's got to be questions from the group. I have a list, and I know you guys pretty well, relatively speaking. I do think it would be great if we could share a little bit more about like the occupational mobility tool or any of the other specific tools that are available in addition to the work that is happening with Atlanta. But I also have, I'm sure there's questions, and we could just, I'd love to hear from those of you on the call about what you're interested in. If you've worked with the bank before, I'd love our bank team to share what they think are the most pressing issues, what they're thinking about on the horizon, what they're hearing from the field. We try to make a lot of connections through this network. So really it's, to the extent, maybe we should have did more of a happy hour feel, but you can turn your cameras on and chat away. I'm happy to kick it off.
Yeah, I think there's one thing I'll definitely throw out there for folks, just to kind of as a teaser for what we're thinking about next year. The Cleveland Fed, along with our system partners, are launching what we call the Worker Voice Project. A lot of folks are trying to get a handle and read on workers and what's going on in the labor market, the Fed included. So this is our effort to kind of do that. The kind of unique twist about it is that we're intending to survey and hold listening sessions with actual workers themselves, rather than intermediaries or employers or things like that. We talk to a lot of different folks in our day-to-day, and I think we recognize that speaking directly with workers is a little bit of a blind spot. So over the next year, we're going to be holding some listening sessions across the district. I'd love to be able to have some conversations with folks about how we can get in contact with some workers or folks. We are particularly interested in, workers in kind of engaged in employment and workforce development organizations. So those recently in training, those that have recently been placed, thinking about why are workers hesitant to return to some jobs, what moves are they trying to make in the labor market, and then the last question is, how are they preparing for themselves for the current labor market. So just a little bit of teaser there, but I'm sure myself or Eli will be kind of leading that project. Myself and Eli will be leading that project, but you'll probably be seeing us out trying to make some of these connections to kind of fill out some of these listening sessions and surveys with some more details in the second, probably late first quarter, but just a teaser out there for everybody.
And I just wanted to jump in really quickly. I see Jill. Hi, Jill. Again, your question is right on target. We've already started having those conversations with the Fund for Our Economic Future regarding their work and trying to see where the timing overlaps so that we can use those learnings to sort of inform the work that we're going to be doing with this project, especially in the economic and workforce development space. So that's definitely something that we've been having a conversation about. One of the things I would say, though, is there are semi-different audiences, but it all does connect. When it comes to their work of where are the workers, they're also looking at specifically workers that are not necessarily connected in employment. We're really focusing as of now, and of course it's still transitioning and growing, for the Worker Voice Project we're speaking about in the Atlanta Fed with the other system partners. But we're really focused on those that are currently employed and then trying to see what sort of led to their decision making and seeing how to, or newly employed, I should really say, and trying to see what we can do to assist from there, if I'm not mistaken.
Great, thank you so much. I have a quick question, and unfortunately, I'm going to ask my question and I have to drop at 4, so I'll have to catch up on the answer. But I'm really interested in the way in which the like your research evolved into these tools, right? So the research on occupation or economic mobility, then that led actually to a tool, and now there's like training, and so it like the initial research turned into something that's really applied. And so I'm just wondering if that happens somewhat serendipitously, or does it start out that way? And so as you think about like this work with interviews with the workers, you know, just curious about that process, about how it ends up with taking that piece of data and then moving it forward into that kind of agenda. And I think about the wage premium in manufacturing, for example, which is such interesting data, and especially with the focus on manufacturing in Northeast Ohio, as a real, you know, that's supposed to be a growth opportunity, and from an equity perspective, supposed to offer that opportunity, and yet the data belies that somewhat. So yeah, just wondering when things turn into something that then has legs in terms of practical application.
Great question, Jill. And I think despite my festive appearance, we're generally a very conservative and slow-moving institution. So it kind of takes time. I think from just a general perspective, I think, you know, we often pick up a research topic that we hear from the field, you know, sort of directly, of whether that's, can you help us answer this one specific question? And that might be, you know, some dollar figure that we can estimate, or it's a kind of clarifying some of the narrative that might be existing out there. So I think Joel's work with the manufacturing premium, I think that, again, kind of clarified a little bit of a narrative out there that that exists. And I think from the my work on the Occupational Mobility Explorer, that whole work was kind of genesis around this question of like, if we could get employers and you know, if we could have this society where people thought about in the skills to kind of transfer between jobs and move up and down, rather than focusing on degrees so much, how could there be additional chances for upward economic mobility for folks? So that was kind of something that we put out there in the paper, and then we also realized that at the time, again, prior to COVID, that we still had a lot of data kind of just sitting on the sidelines that we really could get in the hands of folks and use it a little bit, and use it in a variety of different ways. So it was kind of serendipitous, and I say that because you know, that was pre-COVID, that was a completely different world, but it's actually more relevant now than it was when we did it. So to kind of think about how that happened and arose, and you know, admittedly, I will say that we probably could have done a little bit more of thoughtful programming around the tool and some additional trainings for it and things of that nature. But I think we were kind of in uncharted territory a little bit. You know, tools were never a big thing, but I think they're increasingly being a resource for folks and becoming a thing for folks to use. Oh, and thank you, Eli. Sorry for the, I probably should have said that before the initial disclaimer of the views expressed are those of our own and not of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland or the Federal Reserve System. So thanks, Eli. We got that on the recording at least.
Do we need to see everyone saying it or hear everyone saying it? Back, Jill.
Thanks, Jill.
We'll let Marissa say it because I have a question for her. There you go. Okay, so Marissa, as you think about what Jill's question just was about, how does data make it into practical application? You've been working with workforce and economic data for a long time, and I'm curious, where do you see opportunity to kind of strengthen some of the data work that's happening? I feel like sometimes there's just big holes in what we know and don't know, and would love to get your take on If we could wave a magic wand and have better data somewhere, what would it be?
Again, the views are expressed are not my own and not of the Federal Reserve System or the Cleveland Federal Reserve Bank. But that being said, I've worked with a number of different organizations, and this is, I'm sure everybody knows this, but it's very shocking to know the lack of data that's being collected internally from each individual organization and workforce program. So I first would encourage all of the people of the coalition to leverage their networks to make sure that that data is being collected, whether that looks like a pre-test and post-test of participants, or just collecting who is being served in the workforce development system. You'd be amazed at what isn't being collected. And then when you have folks like us come in and say, oh, well, can we do, and then people say things like, oh, well, can we do this? And can we do that? And can we do this? Or can we answer these questions? You need information to answer questions, right? And it can be qualitative, it can be quantitative, but having a 3-question survey, when you get somebody in the system and when they get out of the system, can make a huge difference. And that's from my researcher hat, right? So I've been in the data collection business a long time, right? Whether I'm with the Federal Reserve or I'm not. And it may not inform our research, but it may inform the coalition's research or individual workforce boards. So that's I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
that's helpful. It does remind me how hard it is when there's a prescriptive list of things you have to collect, and then there's data systems that don't like to work together easily, and there's just, it feels like it could get complex quickly. But it sounds like, like you said, something simple that's more universal might be useful.
Yeah, and just to follow that up, just having accurate, like a CRM, or very similar to what a business would do, I would recommend government participants to do. So like, who are you interfacing with? Do you have the right contact? Because then if you have research questions and your database is up to date, you can go back and query those people. But I've worked with a variety of governments and different workforce intermediaries, and you think that this is actually a very hard lift for a lot of organizations. So when Kyle and I, or the research team, thinks about answering questions, we always say, what data do we have? And so a lot of it's also leveraging our contacts, such as y'all folks, and saying, oh, well, what do you have? What are some interesting questions you're seeing? And if that's, and we hope that's a part of your decision making.
Yep. Well, Kyle, that's exactly where I was going to go as far as disaggregating it. I was going to ask Meredith, not to put you on the spot, but you had 3 data points that you listed in your intro that I think have informed a lot of the early thinking for the Resilient Workforce Initiative. Do we know that information relative to disparities by race? Are we seeing that Ohio or the district is better off or worse off when it comes to those disparities? Or do we not know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't.
What about data people? Kyle, Marissa? Or we just add it to our list, right? Okay.
I mean, so the thing is that's why I say we would love to leverage the networks of the Ohio Workforce Coalition, right? Because the government statistics only can take us so far, because a lot of the stuff is survey data. And once you start slicing and dicing it, it can get a little wobbly, right? That's a technical statistics term, wobbly. Wobbly. But yeah, partnering with organizations, seeing what's happening on the ground. And again, our outreach team is constantly listening, hearing what you guys have to say, hearing what's going on, and then seeing how we can figure that out in the data. Kyle has probably a lot more insights than I do.
No, I was just going to say that that's actually a really good plug, Rebecca, for our program and economic inclusion website. There's a good deal of data that we try to disaggregate as much as possible by race. There's some national metrics, and then there is some metrics produced for the state of Ohio. But be important and to definitely stress Marissa's use of the term wobbly. You know, we include some confidence intervals around these. Again, just being clear and knowing that this data is of interest to folks, but at the same time, you know, there are some underlying challenges with it. So, but to let's see, based of 2020, the black-white employment rate gap can range from 9.5 percentage points to 15 percentage points as an estimate. So it's kind of roughly about 12 percentage points, but there's a lot of wobbliness, as Marissa mentioned.
Is that a district number or a national number?
It's a state of Ohio number.
Okay.
And we produce some estimates for a handful of other states that kind of allow. We have enough sample size that we kind of allow us to do that. But
okay. So Andrew, you're listening to this discussion and you work more kind of on the internal workings. What are your thoughts as you grapple with, you know, strategic planning and thinking about the future of your work? Any thoughts about, you know, what keeps you up at night?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's the whole internal side, but I'm also working closely with the rest of the team. We now have 18 people. And so my background is coming from the consulting world, from entrepreneurship world, where there's been a lot of let's really identify the needs, the opportunities that are out there, the pain points. And that's where Eli and the outreach team and everybody else getting really intentional of where are the gaps that are out in the 4th district. And through conversations, and then from there, really understanding, okay, well, with this gap, what is our role that we want to play? What research, what programs, what work do we need to do? What can we do? What should other partner organizations be doing? And so getting really clear on kind of like mapping out, you know, the next year, the next 3 years, what is our specific role, and working with external partners to kind of hand in hand to help develop that. And so it's to just, take a very collaborative approach, but understanding kind of specifically what are we trying to solve, what metrics or, you know, indicators can we look at that can tell the story and we can measure our progress. So I know, I think at the system level, and it's just getting, and strategy overall, getting more and more clear around those things. And so I think it's an exciting time. The team, as I said, has kind of doubled in size. So there's a lot of opportunity to, we have more people to support these efforts that are going on. But again, it's listening to the people who are on this call and our other stakeholders that are out there.
Wonderful. So we do, I think, have a couple questions in the chat. Mike Hogue, good to see you, Mike. I've known Mike for a long time. He is asking how, making the point that there's very similar market disparities for people with disabilities. How do we connect them or engage with the program on economic inclusion? And Mike, Kyle just dropped an email in the chat. You may know Trey Johnson from previous meetings of the coalition. He is currently supporting that initiative and is based here in Northeast Ohio. And then Renee has a question about the tracking tools that deal with intake, placement, and follow-up. Let's see, are there any that are heading towards regional or widespread use? Oh, not that I'm aware of. bank colleagues? I think you could tell based on Kyle's face. There's none. Renee, that's an ongoing challenge, I think, in the workforce world. And I think we had Lori McKnight is still on. She's a board director in Southeast Ohio. And there's prescriptive data that they have to collect that they report up to the state. And from that system, that's one piece. But then the TANF system has separate metrics and is also connected to workforce. Philanthropy, we have a couple funders on here. They have different expectations and different reporting requirements. There have been conversations for as long as I've been in workforce about how do we better integrate some of this, and remains a big question. Very different than some of the tools that are available in higher ed, which I know you reference is where you came from. Other thoughts, other ideas on the data piece and shared data? Ohio does have a data website that you could check out. I can share the link. It has a lot more data than we've historically had, so I should acknowledge that. We've, I think, come a long way in the last 10 years or so. There's way more available than there was, but it is still, it's always, you always have to remind yourself, what are you not seeing in this? What are you not collecting? And I think that's been super helpful.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if your question about more data thoughts was for me necessarily, but so
Have at it. We're meeting and greeting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Renee. Yeah, I guess I don't have much more to add to that. It sounds like there's a lot of information floating around that would be great if we had it in one central spot, but I can see why that is a huge ask.
Well, so Don actually put in the chat. So Flying High is out in the Mahoning Valley, and they're using OneFlow, and there's several workforce areas that have used OneFlow and may still be. That allows a lot of automated tracking and great information. I think the challenge is connecting. Once you start trying to connect that, you end up with data sharing challenges and whose personal information and what can you share, and then even I will say, I've done some work that looked at performance measures of some providers, and programmatically they have different definitions. I'd love to hear if anyone else experiences it, but programmatically they have different definitions of various points of their program. The easiest one to make an example of is placement. There are programs that count placement as soon as someone shows up for a day of work. There's others that count placement after 30 days. And so one's going to have higher placement numbers and lower retention. The other's going to have lower placement numbers, but higher retention. And it's a matter of, that's just one example. It's a matter of trying to make sense of that. I think that is the challenge.
And to your point, I would like to add too, I think that's part of, personally, speaking for my own self, I think one of the things is hoping that the lexicon on these issues starts coalescing within certain groups, because we're noticing what one word might mean to one person does not carry over from organization to organization. So part of it is just getting everyone on the same page, I feel like, with the proper definitions of what we're all agreeing, or as close to agreement we can get when it comes to those particular definitions. Because if we're not speaking the same language, there's nothing we can really do.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll drop a link into the chat to a Working Nation. They recently released a field guide that has definitions for a lot of terms to try and do what you're describing. One of the challenges is that I think they left off a lot of the foundational terms. And so it's great to have a conversation about what is competency-based hiring and what do we mean about job quality. But if folks aren't on the same page about what is workforce, it's a challenging discussion, and I think there's lots of different interpretations, but I'll put that in the guide. Who else is
Rebecca, you just muted yourself, I think. So.
I did. Thank you. I said no one else feels like talking today. Mute the chat.
Well, I'll throw out a kind of question to those
Please.
listening, I guess. Like what's the one issue or one thing that you wish you could do to improve your day to day with a focus on workforce development? Sorry, I'm sure there could be a lot of different things for a lot of different people.
Do you mean like as a worker, how could my work experience be better? Or like as somebody in this world, what do I want to be doing or be involved in?
Yeah, I would say the latter.
Okay, just checking. Makes more sense, but so I'll just throw in, I'm brand new to this work. I've only worked at United Way for a little over 2 months now. As Rebecca mentioned in my comment, I come from access to higher education, and I'm excited to be working in workforce, but really I and United Way are trying to get really involved in the benefits cliff. And I actually messaged Eli about this already. We're going to get together in January and talk about it. But that's something I know I really want to be involved in. Ken, who I know all of you know well, really wants to be involved in. So that's a big thing on our end.
Glad that there's already connections being made. Successful meeting already, Rebecca.
So I'd like to kick it to the Craig Cernick or the other Rebecca on the call and talk about our not so urban areas and parts of the state that I think she might. Oh, there she is. You disappeared because you went on camera, so I thought you just hung up as soon as I called on you. So I'm curious from your work outside of the major metros, what are you experiencing? How might the bank be helpful to your work?
So I'm Rebecca Kuzma. I work with Strengthening Stark, and I'm learning now that I get confused with the other Rebecca. I am also new to this work. I joined right before we all locked down for COVID, the week before, literally. So still getting my feet on the ground here in Stark County, but we are a more rural, and we don't like to think of ourselves as that, but certainly way more rural than the major communities that are on the call. And but we're experiencing many of the same things that you are. We're trying to bring our partners together, find ways to share data. For me, one of the things that I've been really interested in is getting a better understanding around labor force participation rate. We are also participating with the fund on the Where Are the Workers surveys, so we'll have some information there. And we have a small group of about 30 local partners who work in a group called Career Connect. We have some recent employees that we'd be happy to share with you and see what their experiences have been. So just excited to also be part of this group and learn. I'd like to learn a little bit more about the OneFlow tool. That sounds really interesting. So thank you for the time and the opportunity.
Thanks for sharing, Rebecca. Craig, what do you think from up your way?
So I don't know if this is so much a rural versus urban issue, but right now I'm fascinated with the great resignation, that we're seeing across America. I think since June or July, 4 million Americans quit their jobs every month. And from what we're seeing, they're kind of in 3 different categories, right? We're seeing a category that's permanently leaving the workforce. And we're seeing a category of individuals who are leaving the workforce, maybe not permanently, but at least for the time being, unforeseen. And then we're seeing obviously a huge amount of job churn. And of course, that's to be expected. The pandemic kind of froze the regular job churn in the market. But, the first good article I read about the Great Resignation that's happened this year was in CNN last week. And the scariest part about it is it suggested that a big percentage of the Great Resignation is 55 years of age and older individuals who are leaving workforce for good. A lot of them baby boomers who, because of a fantastic booming stock market and high housing prices, have decided they can retire early. So, in Northeast Ohio, we already have the problem of declining population combined with an older population, combined with the older population now having some wealth and having options to leave the workforce. So this is kind of my new obsession, and I'm trying to get my arms around the statistics to see if it really is true, and what are options besides inventing a cloning machine and cloning our own workers here in Northeast Ohio, how we're going to address that.
Thanks, Craig.
I'll just take off of Craig's lead and say, I think one of the ways that we need to address this is through, the benefits cliff, and trying to figure out how to get people who are not engaged in the workforce engaged in the workforce. We need to figure out a way how to make people get a job and not lose their benefits and then have to quit the job so that they can feed their family. And take their kid to a daycare center that's a good daycare center. I don't think it's rocket science, so I'm glad to see that this is part of something that you guys are working on, because I think that is going to be part of the key of getting our workforce back open again. In all honesty, it's the piece that we've been missing all along, because before we didn't really need them, because that's a horrible thing to say, but I think part of society just viewed them as not important. But now they're not only are they always have been important, but now they're even more important, and we need to figure out a way to get them engaged.
Thanks, Lori. I was going to ask you to also say just a couple words about your broadband work, but before that, the point about the benefit cliff and getting people into work, I think, poses an interesting question for a Federal Reserve Bank, because there's the short term, what do people need now? And then there's long term, what are the policy changes that need to happen for us not to keep subjecting people to the cliff? So with that, you want to say a bit about your broadband work?
The benefits of working from home, right, Rebecca? So one of the things that we did in our area was when the broadband started to become a huge issue, right, because of COVID, and people realizing broadband was not everywhere, which didn't seem like a shocker to me, but apparently it was to other people. We saw all this money coming down from the federal government that's going to be coming down and going to be time limited. And I had a company that came to me and they said, it's great that we're going to get all this money, but we don't even have the workforce that we're supposed to have now. How are we going to have the workforce that we're going to need in a year with all this funding in order to get the line laid? So at that point, I took him literally, I scheduled an appointment with Tri-County, our local career center, took him there, and I said, what can we do about this? And Tri-County worked, and we worked with FAO, the Fiber Optic Association, and the Office of Workforce Transformation out of the governor's office, and we received some funding to get a fiber optic training program started at Tri-County to literally help get this line laid. It's a great program, 6.5-week program in the evenings after work, so people can, who are working retail or who are working a low-income job can go get this training. It's $900. Of course, if you're low income, that would be covered by WIOA and WIOA funding. We also, in the first round, had grant through the Office of Workforce Transformation to cover those that didn't qualify for WIOA funding. It's an amazing class. Once they complete it, they get a certification through FAO. They have to pass a test and they get an FAO certification. We had 12 people in the class, 3 people had to drop out. One just realized this wasn't the pathway for him, which is normal. One actually had COVID and couldn't complete 6.5 weeks. You missed 2 weeks of the program. You missed pretty much most of it. And one just kind of didn't show up the next day. But of the 9 people, 7 were certified immediately. 2 are going to complete their test again. They didn't pass the test the first time, but we're very close. And pretty much the majority will be hired almost immediately by companies. So in my mind, like, this is what we need to do, right? We need to figure out what companies are missing in our area and then work with our training centers, our community colleges, and our 4-year degree programs to get these programs going and started so that we can keep people engaged.
Right.
I would like to jump in and add, part of it is a 2-pronged thought process. So it's not just the workers of like, okay, getting certain things, but also the side of the economic development side of making sure that employers are aware of needing to shift during this time as well, because there is, from what I'm hearing from when I speak to stakeholders, there's this mismatch sometimes between, okay, we have all of these open positions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every employer has been transitioning to a quicker line into the positions. So they might be still sort of requiring what was the older framework of being able to get employees into the door. And to your point, Team Neo, during their aligning opportunities, their time frame of presenting their report, they also had, I believe, Lorraine Community College speak regarding, specifically regarding like this idea of like, okay, let's do the work, but also give them the money while they're in school and have them actually doing apprenticeship type work during the process, instead of, even with IT work, instead of waiting for them to go through the training completely and then get into the job, but have them working in the job while doing the training at the same time, so that it's automatically. And then also looking at those populations, that goes back to diversity, equity, and inclusion, really looking at those populations that that employers have been historically more hands-off or fearful or apprehensive, I should say, to really work with. So populations like immigrant populations or populations that re-entry, not advocating for that, but just saying that could be a possible answer to some of these challenges, is looking and then also shifting some of the not just requirements, but the normal way of doing things has to shift as well on both sides.
Thanks, Eli. I think that's actually a great way to wrap things up today. We talked about the short term, the long term, how you can engage with the bank, how they can engage with you. I'm sure any of the folks on this call would be willing to answer additional questions. We can circulate information as it makes sense. I do want to recognize Lori McKnight as a member of the Ohio Workforce Coalition's current leadership committee, and Meredith Whitehead will be joining our leadership committee effective January 1st. So there are always opportunities to engage with them, engage with us, and to continue this dialogue. Thank you so much to our guests today for being part of this. If there are questions we didn't get to in the chat, I will make sure that they're fielded and circulated to the group. And I hope everyone has a wonderful and relaxing rest of 2021. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Go second string Browns.
Yeah, or third string.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good night.